Well, howdy, everybody, and welcome to our latest Sierra Forum. I'm Jason Mark. I'm the editor-in-chief of Sierra Magazine, and I'm your host for these discussions, which are a chance for Sierra Club members and supporters and activists around the country to hear from some of the best and brightest in the environmental movement and learn about our work to protect clean air, clean water, and a stable climate. Again, if you've got any questions during this, you can always drop them. We'll do about 15 minutes of conversation with our panelists, and then we will open it up to questions from you all. If you're joining us from Zoom, you can put your question right there in the Q&A. And if you're joining us from Facebook, all you got to do is drop it in the comments, and we'll try to get to your questions. So I'd like to, if you would, imagine a miracle drug that could ease many of the stresses of modern life. It'd be a combination mood enhancer and smart pill that might even encourage the remission of cancer. Now imagine that this cure-all was an old-fashioned folk remedy. Just take a hike in the woods or a walk in the park. No prescription necessary. Well, this idea of nature as a drug might sound romantic, but a growing body of research is finding that time spent outdoors has all sorts of benefits for our personal as well as societal well-being. And here today to talk about that is a group of folks who've been promoting nature as a prescription drug. We're going to start with Craig Anderson. He's involved with the Great Outdoors Lab research at the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. He's a postdoc fellow. Margaret Lamar, who's also joining us, she's the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at the Children and Nature Network. That's an organization that uses research and policy work to increase equitable access to the outdoors for children and families of all economic backgrounds, races and ethnicities. And then we got Lornette Vestal. He's the Sierra Club's military and veteran coordinator there in the Southeast for our military outdoors program, working out of Atlanta, Georgia. Well, Margaret, Lornette, and Craig, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for doing this.
Happy to be here.
Craig, let's start with you since you're the researcher. So tell us just about kind of maybe the top lines. What are the latest findings of what we could call, I guess, nature neuroscience? What have you and your fellow researchers found there through the Great Outdoors Lab and other research projects?
Okay. So through the Great Outdoors Lab, it was a collaboration between UC Berkeley and the Sierra Club. And we studied 124 military veterans and also youth from underserved communities who went whitewater rafting to really kind of produce some new, exciting scientific findings on why being in nature is good for our physical and mental health and also our social well-being. And in terms of our findings, as expected, kind of all of our outcomes showed improvements even 1 week after the rafting trip had ended. Really sort of notable was PTSD symptoms, both in the veterans and in the youth, decreased on average of 30% after the rafting trip. And a second finding that we're really excited about is that it seems that the emotion of awe that people feel in nature might be driving these benefits. So awe is an emotion that we feel in the presence of things that are vast, that we don't fully understand in the moment. The beauty of nature is one of the most common and powerful ways that people feel awe. And so each day on those rafting trips, we had people in a diary kind of report on their emotions. And it was really interesting that it was only the awe that people reported, not other positive emotions like joy or, laughing. It was only the awe that predicted whether or not PTSD symptoms would go down, people's sleep would get better, they're feeling more kind of connected in the community 1 week later. And finally, I would add that follow-up research we did suggests that this pattern isn't kind of unique to just whitewater rafting. So the nature that people can, encounter in their day-to-day lives, noticing a beautiful sunset or the flowers sort of blooming in their neighborhoods, also kind of has this effect of increasing awe and then also these benefits kind of in the long run.
So I just want to stick with you for 1 second, Craig, because this is so fascinating and such important work. So it's just that sense, awe kind of putting things in perspective and maybe kind of communicating like, your problems, as tough as they might be when you're out in wild nature and you're kind of among rocks that are millennium years old, your trees that are hundreds of years old. It just kind of it puts one's own personal challenges into greater perspective?
That's right. So one thing that awesome things tend to do is make us feel kind of small, right? So kind of thinking about, geologic timeline or how long the Grand Canyon's been around, that makes us feel small. But kind of one of the effects of that is it makes kind of our daily hassles and our problems, those also feel smaller. And kind of my work and our work in the lab has also shown to help people connect with others, kind of fold into the collective. So people feel smaller, but also more connected to other people, to kind of nature and humanity more broadly. So I think that's a great way to put it, is it makes kind of your stressful things and your problems seem smaller as well. Gives you new perspective.
It's really encouraging research. So Margaret, your group, the Children and Nature Network, you try to get kids and families outdoors. So how have you guys been able to use this research in your broader advocacy work and your broader work to get kids and families outdoors?
Yeah, thanks. We, the Children and Nature Network hosts an online searchable research library at childrenandnature.org, and we have over 800 peer-reviewed research articles there, summarized and accessible, that demonstrate the connection between people and nature. And so people far and wide across the world use it, report to us that they use it for all kinds of things, for their own research, for advocacy, for program support, all kinds of things. And we know that when we pull the research out, we can make the case. There is so much research now that helps us make the case in unique ways. Because the library is searchable, you can pull specific things. So when we work with municipal government, we often go, think about what's important to the mayor or what's important to the public health agency. What is that particular city's priority? And then we're able to pull the research specific to that particular priority. In Baltimore, we're working on violence reduction and really thinking about how the research does and doesn't support that yet. So we're able to think about it that way. When we are, just that recently we were invited to a major health institution in Atlanta, and we were able to pull the mental health research because that's what their particular interest was. And that results in all kinds of action. They say, oh, we had no idea that nature has such power, or that the research is so strong in these particular ways. So we're able to customize that for various interests that people have.
That's really great. We're already getting a couple questions from people on Zoom. Dropping your questions or your comments there in the Q&A box. Again, we'll remind folks, if you're joining us from Facebook, go to the comments, put in a question, and we will try to get to it. But before we go to your comments and questions, I want to hear from Lornette Vestal, who works again with the Syracuse Military Outdoors Program. So Lornette, the work that you've done, and Craig kind of mentioned this earlier, talking about PTSD, what have you seen among veterans who are coming out of the service and might be having a lot of challenges with their reentry into civilian society?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jason. So kind of thinking about folks who are transitioning out of the military to civilian world. You have gentlemen who are, 2 years older than me who have, transitioned out to the military after serving 4 years or, 40 years in the military. So no matter when you transition to civilian world, one of the things the armed forces is still struggling and coping with, dealing with, is how to transition these men and women back to society. I can speak from personal experience. My discharge from the military, I took a course, 3 days. They said I didn't have to shave anymore. And here goes my DD-214, which is the most important document you get when you get out, that says you're no longer in the armed forces. And they sent me on my way. So a lot of these things I had to figure out on my own. So the good thing about the Sierra Club Military Outdoors is our program is designed to, help veterans, no matter what, or in military service members, no matter when they got out, to transition back to the civilian world by connecting with nature and also fellow service men and women. whether it's veterans, active duty, or guardsmen. It doesn't matter. All are welcome to the Military Outdoors program.
And Lornette, I wonder if you could talk about a specific outing that maybe you led or participated in when you saw real changes among the veteran participants.
Yeah, I can speak from actually a river trip. So 2016, we do, every year we do, the Sierra Club Military Outdoors does the Green River trip, which is Colorado, Utah. And we take the first part of September, the first 2 weeks, the first week of September, we take on military veterans. And then the second week, September, that coincides with 9/11, it's military veterans and also first responders. So we had a gentleman who attended. He was a 20-year Air Force gentleman. He brought his 20-year-old daughter. He was kind of reserved, kept to himself for the first couple of days, only really communicating with his daughter. By the third day, kind of floating down the river, we're in between the canyons, and at nighttime it's the stars. He started to come out of his shell, speak to us more, to the larger group, him and his daughter. And what was very interesting is after that trip, we created a Facebook group for the Gates of the Door trip, and we got a message, myself and the outings leader for that. And his wife was kind of thanking us. The gentleman was like, she said her husband, who was the Air Force guy, could not stop talking about the trip, how wonderful it was, how awesome it was to connect with fellow military vets and also service members. And it kind of just changed his perspective. And from that, he became a volunteer with the Sierra Club Military Outdoors. And he had heard about this trip through word of mouth. It was just an Air Force buddy of his told him about it because he had attended the year prior. So it was just kind of getting that word of mouth. But I'm thinking that only not changes, that experience was positive for him, but it had an impact on his own personal relationship with his wife. Who knows what he brought to that
That's
trip.
really encouraging stuff.
He really took back.
Craig, I'm wondering if you could talk about kind of some of the science behind why it's important to do some of these is rafting trips. My understanding is you're trying to kind of control for the beneficial effects that some people get from cardiovascular exercise, right? You get that kind of like adrenaline high, whereas when you're rafting, yes, you can have adrenaline, but you're not hiking all day. You're kind of mostly sitting there. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So I'm a researcher, so research we'll always say that we need more research, but I think it's particularly true for these endeavors, and we need a certain kind. So we need what's called randomly controlled trials. So we need to have people going into the outdoors and seeing how that stacks up against kind of treat it as usual. Something else that we know already works, so we can exactly quantify, what is this added benefit that we're getting out of these outdoors activities, because these are the types of things that, healthcare providers, they think about when they're thinking about adapting these things. So the thing about whitewater rafting is it's really hard to have a good control condition for that. So in my current position as a postdoctoral fellow at the San Francisco VA hospital site of UCSF, I'm trying to start up a study where we compare veterans who go rock climbing outdoors to rock climbing indoors in like a gym setting. So both of those conditions has physical exercise, right? Social connection, connecting with other people, both things that we know that are good for people, but we're really going to isolate that benefit of being in the outdoors and the awe that people feel outdoors to see if we can quantify that and pin that down.
We've got a number of people putting in questions here in the Zoom Q&A chat. Thanks so much for that. Again, if you're on Facebook, you can drop a question there in the comments field on the wall there on Facebook, and we'll get to it. But before we go to audience questions, I got one more question for both Margaret and then Lornette. I'm wondering, Margaret, have you seen any hospitals or public health agencies that are trying to take advantage of this research? And Lornette, I'm wondering what, if anything, is happening, again, and Craig kind of mentioned it briefly, through the Veterans Administration hospitals.
Yeah, I'll absolutely. So it really boils down to the partnerships between the park institutions and the medical institutions. And UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital in Oakland is a great example of a hospital system that's taken this on and established the Center for Nature and Health at with Dr. Nushin Razani as the lead. And they have really, among many different park prescription programs across the country, really thought through that park medical institution partnership. The regional park districts partners with Dr. Razani's program there at the Center for Nature and Health. And it's really thinking about how those prescriptions are made. The clinics have to ensure that the park users have access to the parks, which is a challenge in communities of color often. And then the park districts then have to figure out how to create a welcome mat for those often new park users. And Healthy Parks, Healthy People, among many others in the Bay Area, have really thought through that welcome mat. And that sense of belonging and safety is so important. So it's not just about the prescription and the hospital, it's really about that partnership, which is complex and takes years often to really establish a good working model together. And I want to acknowledge that not all communities have access to quality natural spaces. So, this requires more policy advocacy and city government getting involved and other folks getting involved to ensure that looking at it through the health equity lens.
And Lorna, then what have you seen there within the VA system, the Veterans Administration Hospitals?
Yeah, so with the VA, it's a complicated situation. So the VA, they're looking for research like what Craig is doing with our Go Lab and things like that. And the more research they can get, the more they can implement these programs. So I've spoken to several social workers who are doing outdoor outdoor therapy, is what they call it now. And right now I'm working with the Atlanta Vet Center and kind of introducing them slowly to the military outdoors and seeing that there's an interest. So as far as the larger VA incorporating this into their work for veterans and how they help veterans with PTSD or other ailments, it's going to be a slow process. But I think work like the Go Lab and more research is needed. So the more research, the more funding we get, the more we can show that this type of nature RX is important, just as important as giving someone a pill or other mental health services that they provide at the VA. But it's a slower process because it's a large government institution at the whims of whoever is in the administration. So the more research we can do, the more we can encourage VA, not just here in Atlanta, Georgia, but across the country to adapt this.
So right now it's kind of hospital by hospital or kind of district by district, as it were.
Yeah, right now it's the providers on the ground who are looking to these alternatives and trying to incorporate them into the VA. The VA is not wholesale put a stamp on this program and this program. They're still waiting for more research. So it's up to the individual providers who are looking to tell their clients, like, hey, have you thought about this alternative?
I do, before we go to audience questions, I do have one follow-up for you, Margaret. You made the really good point that not all communities have got access to green spaces. So I'm wondering, has this research allowed you guys to promote your efforts to create and sustain green schoolyards?
Yeah, thanks for that. So the everyday touch with nature it's especially important for the health and well-being of children and families. So one of the strategies for public health and for that access to everyday touch is through greening schoolyards. Oftentimes cities don't have more park space to acquire. There's just not enough land. So we're able to use those public playgrounds, turn them into, by greening them, providing additional amenities, including access to them after hours through joint use agreements or shared use. We're able to really see the whole community be able to use those green schoolyards as parks after hours, and then the children can then use them for learning and play during the day. So really, there's a huge effort across the country spurring policy and programming and all kinds of work to green the school grounds for that everyday touch with nature, so that they build that appetite for some of these other kinds of programs that might, and build the appetite to go to other city parks and other sort of destinations in nature.
So you guys have got about 10 minutes left, and I do want to make sure we've got plenty of time for audience questions here. Again, thanks everybody who's dropping questions there in the chat. And again, if you're on Facebook, you can put them there in the comments. We have a lot, I'm going to try to spread them out, but we do have a lot of questions here for Lornette. One question here, a woman named Ann points out that many Sierra Club programs are one-off, and she wants to know if you could comment, or maybe also Craig could comment on the therapeutic effects of ongoing programs versus like a one-time experience, like a peak experience of going rafting, you know, through the Rockies or whatever.
Craig, you want to go? Or I can tell you. I can start off. So the Memorial Day River Run and trips like the Gates of Lador, those are, you know, yearly annual trips that the Sierra Club Military Outdoors provide. But the Military Outdoors program is just like our ICO program and our local outings, where it's a program that's volunteer-led, and we train military veterans, family members, and community members to take folks out. So it doesn't have to be a big-time rafting trip. It can just be I'm working with a group down in Augusta to create a program down in South Georgia, and what they want to do is picnics for veterans and their families. So it could be something simple as that. So it's ongoing. So it's not just these one-offs. It's just kind of building that sense of community. And we do have the big trips. But the focus is smaller.
But yeah, trying to make sure there's some sort of local component when they get back.
Exactly.
I think this might be a question here for you, Craig. Claire wants to know if there's Gail here wants to know about if there's any research showing the benefits of just slowing down. That, you know, a lot of hikers or even trail runners, I guess, you know, they're going real fast, trying to get from point A to point B, log those trail miles. If there's any research on are these therapeutic effects more noticeable if people are also kind of going slower in the outdoors?
Sure. Yeah, I'll preface this by saying that one of the great things about the outdoors is people can use them in the ways that are best for them. So, you know, if people want to do their trail running and they're going really fast, well, maybe that works for them. But I will say that there's some evidence showing that kind of cultivating a mindful sort of attention, which totally entails slowing down and kind of taking it all in and definitely getting off your phone, right? That can actually kind of lead to some of these benefits and make people feel more awe. So there's a researcher at UCSF with elderly people who kind of takes them on mindful walks. And when they're paying attention to nature, she finds a lot of great benefits to the awe that they feel, and also benefits like with anxiety and well-being and happiness and whatnot. So if you're thinking about how we might increase awe in nature, being mindful is a great way to do that.
And get off your phone. Leave the phone at home.
Exactly.
Lorna, we got another question for you. This is from a woman named Judith, who wants to know, I guess this is kind of a question, has there been any collaboration with the group, the Veteran Farmer Alliance, formerly known, I think, as Farms Not Arms, and I think that works to place veterans as you know, on farms, working on farms, and help them start their own farms. And obviously that's the kind of outdoor engagement where you'd probably be doing it like 70 hours a week if you're a farmer. Any collaboration with the Farmer Veteran Alliance?
Well, not in particular the Farmers Veterans Alliance, but my colleague up in the Northeast in New York, Aaron Leonard, he's working with vets in Vermont. And one of the vets is a Marine Corps vet named John Turner, who has his VT farm, which is bringing veterans on his farm and doing organic farming and things of that nature. So we've worked with organizations and groups like that, and some of the vets who come to the Sierra Club Military Outdoors are already doing that in their community, and they're just using what the Sierra Club teaches them to bring in more people and have a bigger outreach.
Thanks for that, Lornette. We got a question here for you, Margaret, and Brian wants to know that how do you ensure that programs like these are truly inclusive and equitable, and that they're reaching folks from all cultures, races, ethnicities, backgrounds, geographies, and incomes? What are you doing to make sure that these programs aren't just reaching, say, well-to-do kids and families?
Yeah, Brian, I appreciate that question. It's really important to us. We've been working with the National League of Cities on equitable access to nature, and this comes up all the time. We have 18 cities who are grappling with this very question. And one of the things that we have learned from our cities is that it's not about marketing, it's about engagement. And the marketing materials is kind of an outreach model. And really what we're looking at is flipping that script altogether to go beyond outreach to real engagement and building the relationship between the program providers, the parks folks, and the community is essential to having that drive to participate come from the community, not from the parks or not from the program providers. So it's really about building relationships. And a great example is the multicultural walk led by East Bay Regional Parks District, where they have built over years, built relationships in different ethnic communities to come together to create this engagement in the spaces that is beyond the brochure, beyond the marketing materials, beyond the program description, and really about relationships. So I would invite all of us to rethink our marketing as engagement and participation and relationship.
Thanks so much for that, Mark. It's really interesting. Craig, we got a question here from some anonymous attendee who wants to know about research from other countries, specifically research from Japan involving forest bathing, which I think is this traditional Japanese practice of kind of going out into the woods and taking it all in.
Sure. So I'm sorry to say that the United States, we're lagging behind other countries in kind of formalizing nature as a tool for healthcare. So as the user pointed out, Japan and also South Korea, both countries where people have a lot of stress, high rates of mental health problems, they have put millions of dollars into federally funded like forest bathing institutes, kind of outdoors locations where people can go and find sort of relief and healing. And they've put a lot of money towards that research as well. So kind of identifying compounds in the air in forests that might kind of drive some of the biological and physiological effects. So there's a lot of great work being done in other countries. I would like to see some of that work being done in our country moving forward.
Lorna, this is a very specific woman. This person, Paul, here is a club leader, outing leader, so Vietnam veteran, and he wants to just get involved.
Oh, well, you can always check out us on our website, but you also can email me at lornettvestal@sierraclub.org and just kind of inquiry. This program is nationwide, so you don't have to be in Atlanta to be part of the Military Outdoors. It's just like our other Sierra Club ICO and local outings. It's everywhere. And we work with chapters and we work with individuals.
Final question. Do you get the therapeutic effects in a very crowded place, say a Yosemite Valley or woods? So it's beautiful and yet kind of choked with people.
Sure. I mean, that's hard. We want nature to be accessible to everyone, right? And then people can be really disappointed or stressed out or angry if there's a bunch of people all crowding in as well. So that's a hard question without an easy solution. One thing about kind of this mindful attitude that I mentioned is that kind of helps with not just boosting awe, but all other sorts of kind of healthy mindset. So you can notice other people may be crowding you or the noise that they're making, but it helps you kind of let that go a little bit. And the thing about awe is it kind of helps people recognize a more common humanity. So that might actually help, you appreciate this awe-inspiring kind of setting that you're in, rather than kind of focusing in on, the music that somebody's playing. I would hope that we get to a place where people feel like, they're in nature, they have a place in nature, and you can talk to other people about it, I don't think and I think this applies broadly, we were kind of not talking to each other and hearing each other as much as we could be. So that's kind of my hope for the awe-inspiring and healing power of nature, is that it kind of has these social effects as well.
Well, I want to thank you all. Thanks to Mark Burnett. Thanks to Craig Anderson joining us for today's conversation. And thanks to you all for tuning in. I want to remind you, pretty straightforward call to action on this one. In the woods, go for a hike, go for a bike ride in the woods, take your family out there if you can. If you're looking for resources for how to get out in the woods, there's always sierraclub.org. Look for our outings, local outings in your area, which are very easy ways to get plugged in. If you want to learn more about Lornette's work, just email them, lornette.vestal@sierraclub.org, or go and look for our Military Outdoors program. If you want to learn more about the Children in Nature Network, check them out on Children in Nature Network. And I'm sure you can Google Craig Anderson and find about more of work as a postdoctorate fellow looking into the science of awe, excuse me. And again, thanks so much. You can learn more about the Sierra Club and our work online all the time at sierraclub.org, sierramagazine.org, of course on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. But shut all those things out and go for a hike in the woods. Thank you so much.